Okay, we're going to look at Math 31, Section 1.4, homework help here. And this lesson is all about how to round correctly. I've always thought rounding is an easy skill, but I find a lot of people don't master the concepts and then they have trouble with it. So in this first section, we're just going to do rounding to a specified place. You can see in some of these examples here, rounding to the nearest 10, the nearest 100, 10,000, and various other choices along the way. So let's do our own examples down here. In example 1, we're supposed to round to the nearest 100. So I'm going to underline the hundreds digit. And then what you do is you look next door, and if that next digit is 5 or higher, you round that hundreds digit up. Otherwise, you just leave it as it is. So with a 7 next door, you're going to round up to 3,700. So the 6 becomes a 7, and then all the digits to the right just turn into zeros. So 3672 rounded to the nearest 100 is 3,700. Okay, the next one here, we're supposed to round to the nearest 10. I'll underline the tens digit, and then its next door neighbor is a 3, which doesn't change that 5. Anything 5 or higher will bump the rounding digit up. So we're going to leave it at 9 and a 5. The 5 won't change, and then we substitute a 0 on the back there. So that's closer to 950 than it would be 960. Okay, the 10,000s digit is the first digit here. It's got a 7 in. So that 7, the only choices are 70,000 or 80,000. And since the 8 is 5 or higher, you're going to bump it up to 80,000. Okay, this next one is the same number, we're just rounding differently. So in both example C and D, we're dealing with 78,132, but this time we're rounding to the nearest 1,000. So we're going to underline that 8, and we're either going to leave it as 78,000 or bump it up to 79,000. And when you got a mere little 1 there, you're not going to change anything. That 8 is going to stay an 8. So 78,000. Okay, in part B here, it's the same skills. We're just putting the numbers in some sort of context here. But really, there's nothing different about this section. We're just going to identify the number and round it to the place that's specified. A recent census of the city of Astoria, Oregon, found that the population of that coastal town was 9,595. Round this number to the nearest 100. So the choices are 9,500 or 9,600, and with a 9 next door, we're going to prefer bumping it up to 9,600. So my dad, who was raised in Astoria, was raised in a town that is currently around 10,000 people, a little less than 10,000 people. Okay, Babe Ruth hit 714 home runs in his career, and until 1974, when Hank Aaron beat his record, that stood almost 34 years. Actually, I think that's what that turns out to be. 30-some years his record stood. Hank Aaron's accomplishment was to hit a 715th home run and then go on till he got to 755. So we're going to round all three of these numbers, the Babe Ruth number, the Hank Aaron surpassing Babe Ruth number, and then the Hank Aaron final number here. So let's start with 714. We're rounding to the nearest 10. So we're going to underline the tens digit, and next door is not enough to bump that up. So Babe Ruth's number is approximately 710. Let me write that correctly. Hank Aaron's number, if you round it to the nearest 10, with that 5 next door is going to bump it up to 720, and we're approximating. And then the 755, when you look next door, and you have a 5 next door, goes to 760. So those numbers, when you round to the nearest 10, are 710, 720, and 760. Okay, the Chesapeake Bay Bridge, I remember driving across it It's 23 miles long, but in feet, it's 121,440 feet long. So we're supposed to round to the nearest 10,000. Well, here's the 10,000 spot. Sorry, let me try that again. Here's the next 10,000. Here's the 10,000 spot, and next to it's a 1. So instead of 130,000, we're going to leave it at closer to 120,000. The 2 doesn't get changed. Now notice that every digit to the right of it becomes a 0. And that's how you round. Okay, so now let's use rounding to help us estimate sums and differences. In this first example, example H, we're going to be adding, so we're summing. And we're supposed to, it says according to the directions, round to the nearest 10. And we do that before the adding and subtracting happens, just as a way of estimating. So 48 is closer to 50. 263 is closer to 260. And 24 is closer to 20 than 30. So we have an estimate here of 330. And since it's an estimate, we can write approximately. That's one way to do it. Or there's a symbol for that. It's a sort of squiggly looking equal sign here. And I'm not sure how far off that is from 330, but it should be fairly close. Now the same technique is going to be used in this next one. If you round 746 to the nearest 10, it's actually 750. And then 52, when you round it to the nearest 10, is closer to 50. So this is close to 700. And we'll put the little wavy equal sign. Another version of that wavy equal sign is simply an equal sign with a dot above it. So that means approximately 700 also. Now 746 minus 52 does not actually equal 700. It's close though, and that's the idea. Okay, last two examples. No, we got more than that. Examples J and K, we're doing the same skill, but we're rounding this time to the nearest 100. So a little bit looser approximation. The hundreds digit here has a 3 in it, and the 2 next door means we're not going to change that 3. So 8,300. Add to that, let's see, we're going to round up, but the 9 doesn't have anywhere to go unless you call it 20, the 19 at 20. So bumping up the 9 1 gives a 0, and then you have to bump up the 1 also, so 2,000. So this is 10,300 is the estimate. Okay, and just for fun, let's add up the original numbers and see how far off we were. Okay, these add up to 8, and a 7, and a 2 with a carry, and here you get 10,278. So it was only 22 off out of 10,000, so more than 10,000. So yeah, really good estimate. Okay, estimating doesn't always work quite so well, but that was a pretty good example. Okay, here we're rounding to the nearest 100 again. So instead of a 5 there, because it's got a 7 next door, we're going to say 6. So 1, 4, 6, and what used to be a 7 and what used to be a 3 turn into zeros. And we're subtracting from that the rounded version of this one. So that 8 does not change, so we're going to leave it as 6, 8, and the 2 zeros. Okay, subtracting. We're going to have to borrow here. And 13 take away 6 is 7. So it's about 7,800. I'll just put approximately here. instead of the squiggly equal sign. All right, a couple more pages here. In this example, we're supposed to round to the nearest 10 to solve the problem, or to get an estimate of the answer, and then we'll add or subtract as indicated. Now, in your problem, you're given it in this information in a chart form, but I've got it a little bit different here. Estimate the distance all the way from Kansas City to Oklahoma City if the 3 legs from Kansas City to Emporia and then Emporia to Wichita and finally Wichita all the way to Oklahoma City are 108 miles, 89 miles, and 161 miles respectively. So I think, what was it? We're supposed to round to the nearest 10. Okay. So I'm going to highlight the tens column in each case. And then in another color, I'm going to highlight the digit that determines whether you round up or not. Okay. So 108 is a 1 and a 0 with an 8 next door, so it's going to be 110. 108 is closer to 110 than it would be 100. And then an 8 with a 9 next to it rounds up to 90. And 161, when you round to the nearest 10, the 1 is not going to affect the 6, so it's going to be just 160. And we're going to add the distances to find the total distance. So adding the next column, 1, 9, and 6 gives 16. You carry the 1, and it's about 360 miles. Now let's just do the actual problem and find out how far off we are. I don't think it asks you to do this, but we're just doing it for fun. Okay, so the first column adds up to 18. And then 15 and 3. So 358 miles, and our estimate was 360, and you can see that's barely any error. Okay, this last one here, we're gonna let's see, what does it say? Oh, this is still underneath the same instructions. Let me go back. Yeah, we're rounding to the nearest 10 here. Okay, so let's see. We're supposed to estimate these and add them. And we're going to the nearest 10. So let me highlight the tens columns. And this one has a 0 in that position. Okay, so next I'll highlight the determining digit, the one next to it. Okay, 628 is closer to 630 than 620. 73 is closer to 70 than it is 80. 142 is closer to 140 than it is 150. And 8 is closer to 10 than it is 0. So let me put these in vertical format and we'll finish this exercise here. Of course, we get 0 in the first column. Then we get 15. You'll carry the 1 here. Let me make that look like more like a 5. And then in the column now, it's 1, 6, and 1. We get 8. So it's about 850 is the sum of those numbers. Okay, I think that does it for us. So I hope this short little video helps you with section 1.4 on your homework.